A quiet hospital hallway, a closed door, a pregnant wife who walks in at the worst possible moment and sees her husband holding another woman's newborn. It should have broken her, but what no one in that room understood was that she was not weak. She was not powerless. She was the one person with enough ownership and enough truth to bring an empire crashing down. What follows is a story of betrayal, corporate deception, and the kind of justice that does not whisper, it strikes. And trust me, you will not guess how fast everything flips once we begin. Before we dive in, tell us what time you are listening and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We would love to hear from you. Ava Kensington pushed open the sliding doors of Lakeside Medical Center just after midnight, the winter air still clinging to her coat as she stepped into the bright, buzzing lobby. Her breath carried the cold of the Chicago night, and her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the strap of her bag across her shoulder. She was 7 months pregnant, and every movement came with a warm, careful ache that reminded her to slow down, yet her mind refused to listen. Cole had told her he was handling an urgent corporate emergency, something about a late financial report that could not wait until morning, and at first she believed him the way she always believed him, trusting his calm voice even when something inside her tugged with unease. Tonight the tug became a knot, and it led her here, into this stark, fluorescent place that hummed with quiet urgency and the muted sounds of late-night emergencies. Ava moved toward the elevator bank, her steps steady but cautious, guided more by instinct than reason. She had tried calling Cole twice, then a third time, then again when the silence became unbearable. Each call went straight to voicemail, which was unlike him. Even on his busiest nights, he always answered for her, always said he did not want her worrying. That was why the silence unsettled her. She pressed the elevator button and waited as a pair of nurses hurried past, their sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. One glanced at Ava's stomach, offered a polite smile, then disappeared down the hall. Ava wished she could return the smile, but her chest felt tight, and her thoughts churned with too many unspoken questions. When the elevator opened with a soft ding, she stepped inside and pressed the button for the 4th floor, her pulse beating faster as the doors slid shut. The ride felt impossibly slow. The elevator hummed upward, carrying her toward whatever truth waited above. She rubbed her belly gently, feeling the reassuring push of movement beneath her palm. Her child was strong, steady, a small anchor in a sea of rising anxiety. Ava whispered a quiet promise to the baby, a promise she had made countless times before, that everything would be all right, that she would always keep them safe. The doors opened to a brightly lit hallway that smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm cotton. A nurse walked by carrying a stack of blankets, and another pushed a cart filled with monitors. Farther ahead, a large sign hung above a wide set of double doors. Labor and delivery. Ava paused at the threshold, unable to explain why her legs hesitated even though her heart urged her forward. She entered the waiting area, a place filled with muted voices and soft lighting meant to comfort anxious families. Her eyes swept the room out of habit rather than expectation, but then she froze. Draped over a plastic chair near the door to Delivery Room 4 was a charcoal gray coat she knew as well as her own reflection. The familiar stitching at the collar, the subtle worn edge at the sleeve, the faint scent of cedar that always clung to it. Cole's coat. Her breath caught. Next to it lay his travel mug, the one she had given him for Christmas, its silver surface reflecting the harsh overhead lights. A phone charger rested beside it, plugged neatly into the wall. Her heart stumbled in her chest as her gaze drifted to the closed door behind the chair. Delivery Room 4. She swallowed hard, forcing her legs to carry her closer, though the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before her. A nurse pushed through the door at that moment, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. She looked at a clipboard, then called out in a clear, steady voice that cut through the quiet room. "The father can come back now. The baby is crowning." The words hit Ava like a cold wave. She felt the world tilt, her vision narrowing as reality collided with suspicion in a way that made her stomach twist. She reached for the back of a nearby chair, steadying herself as her pulse thundered in her ears. The nurse glanced at her, offering a polite nod before disappearing back into the room. Ava's hand trembled as she stepped toward the small window built into the door, each step a battle between fear and disbelief. She told herself she was wrong, that she misunderstood, that there had to be another explanation. But deep down, a quiet part of her already knew the truth. Ava reached the window, bracing herself before she dared to look inside. What she saw stole the breath from her lungs. Cole stood at the bedside, his hand intertwined with another woman's, his body leaning forward as if trying to hold her together through the pain of labor. The woman, younger, dark-haired, her face contorted with the strain of contraction, clung to him desperately. Ava recognized her. Marina Vale, Cole's junior analyst, someone he had mentioned casually in conversation, someone he praised for her work ethic, someone Ava had never thought twice about because she trusted her husband. Cole bent close, speaking softly into Marina's ear, and Marina nodded, gripping his hand the way Ava once gripped his during their birthing classes. The sight hollowed Ava from the inside out, leaving only a cold, ringing silence where her heartbeat should have been. She stepped back from the window, her palm pressed against her chest, as the truth settled over her like winter frost. Ava stepped away from the window, her breath trembling as if the hallway itself had turned colder. The fluorescent lights above her hummed with a relentless brightness that made everything feel too sharp, too exposed, too real. She pressed a hand against her belly, willing her legs to steady, willing her thoughts to slow. The muted sounds of labor coming from behind the door seemed to echo through her bones, each cry from the woman inside twisting deeper into her chest until she felt she might collapse. She took a slow breath, then another, trying to gather herself, but her pulse stayed uneven, fast and frightened. The door to delivery room 4 opened again, and Cole stepped out with a quick, urgent movement. He had been wiping his hands on a paper towel, and he looked back into the room before closing the door halfway. When he finally turned and saw her standing there, his entire body went rigid. Shock flashed across his face first, followed by a strained mixture of panic and irritation that tightened his jaw. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ava felt herself rooted to the floor, unable to move, unable to look away from the man she thought she knew. "What are you doing here?" Cole said in a low hiss, glancing around the hallway as if afraid someone might hear him. He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice further, his eyes darting between her pale face and the nearby nurse's station. "Ava, this is not the time. You should not be here." Ava opened her mouth, but no words formed. Everything inside her felt tangled and heavy, as if language itself had abandoned her. Cole sighed sharply, rubbing the bridge of his nose with the edge of his thumb. His frustration seemed to swell, replacing any flicker of guilt with an impatient tension that radiated from his shoulders. "You cannot make a scene," he said. "Do you understand me? This is already complicated. You do not need to add more pressure right now. Go home. I will explain everything later." Ava stared at him. The hallway seemed to thicken around her, filled with a quiet that mocked her inability to speak. She felt her throat tighten painfully. "Explain what?" she managed to whisper. Her voice sounded small, foreign to her own ears. Before Cole could respond, a nurse walked by, pushing a cart filled with warm blankets. She slowed when she saw Ava's expression, her brow lifting with concern. "Ma'am, are you all right?" the nurse asked gently. "Do you need to sit down?" Cole stepped between them with an awkward, tense smile. "She is fine," he said quickly, "just a little overwhelmed. Pregnancy can do that." His tone carried a familiarity that made Ava's stomach clench. The nurse looked from one to the other, sensing something uneasy, but she nodded politely and moved on. Ava swallowed a shaky breath. "Why is your coat out here?" she asked quietly. "Why are you in that room? Why are you holding her hand?" "Like so?" Cole closed his eyes for a moment, as if he were gathering patience he no longer had. "Ava, not here," he whispered. "You should not be wandering around the hospital at night. You should be resting. This is not good for you or the baby." His attempt at gentleness landed like an insult. Ava felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from anger, but from humiliation, so sharp it made her vision blur for a second. She tried to steady her breathing, but the weight of the moment pressed down on her until her chest felt tight. The door behind Cole opened a few inches. Marina's voice drifted out, strained from labor but still clear. "Cole," she called weakly, "they need you. Please, come back." Ava felt her heart twist when she heard her say his name with that familiarity, the kind that came from nights she did not know about, from moments she had not been part of. Cole looked over his shoulder, torn for a second. then turned back to Ava with a strained sigh. "I have to go," he said. "She needs me right now. Please do not stand here. People are looking." Ava looked around automatically. A couple sitting in the waiting area tried to pretend they were not staring. A young man scrolling his phone glanced up awkwardly and then looked away. A nurse by the charting desk watched with thinly veiled curiosity. Her hands paused over the keyboard. Every gaze felt like a spotlight, illuminating her in ways she never wanted to be seen. Especially not tonight. Especially not like this. Cole leaned closer. "You should leave before this gets worse," he whispered. "Please do not embarrass yourself." The words struck her harder than any shout could have. She felt them settle deep inside her, heavy and cold. She could not respond. Her voice had abandoned her again. All she could do was breathe and hold on to the railing near the wall to keep herself from falling forward. "Go home, Ava," Cole said once more, softer now but still urgent. "I will call you when this is over." He turned back toward the door, slipping inside without waiting for her answer. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving her alone in the hallway with nothing but the sound of distant monitors and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Ava stared at the closed door, her hand still gripping the railing, her heart beating in uneven, painful rhythms as the truth settled deeper into her bones. The hallway around her faded into a blur of white walls and quiet footsteps, and she stood perfectly still, frozen in a moment she could not escape. Ava moved down the hallway as if her body no longer belonged to her, each step driven more by instinct than awareness. The bright lights above her seemed too harsh, and the floor beneath her felt unsteady, as though the building itself were shifting beneath her feet. She gripped the railing along the wall, trying to steady her breathing, but the tightness in her chest only grew. A dull pressure spread across her abdomen, not strong enough to be a contraction, but sharp enough to warn her that her body was reacting to the shock. She tried to inhale slowly, hoping the trembling in her hands would ease, but nothing inside her felt calm. The hallway echoed faintly with voices behind closed doors, the kind of late-night sounds that should have comforted her, yet every noise made her flinch. When she reached the intersection near the elevators, her vision flickered with a thin wash of gray. She blinked, willing herself to stay upright, but her knees buckled without warning. She reached out, her fingers scraping the wall as she fell to one side, landing on her hip with a soft cry that surprised even her. The cold tile sent a shiver through her entire body. A passing orderly gasped and rushed toward her, calling to a nurse across the hall. Within seconds, more hands surrounded her, voices layering over each other with urgent questions. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" one asked. "Are you hurting? Are you having contractions? Are you dizzy?" Ava tried to answer, but her breath came too fast. She pressed both hands to the swell of her stomach, as though trying to reassure the child inside that she was still here, still fighting to stay steady. Her pulse raced beneath her skin, her heart pounding in a frantic rhythm that scared her more than she wanted to admit. She felt someone lift her shoulders gently while another nurse checked her pulse. Her world blurred in and out as she was transferred onto a gurney. She heard wheels squeaking, faint echoes of clipped commands, and the soft beep of a monitor being switched on. The ceiling lights streamed past her like bright stars as they pushed her toward the emergency wing. They brought her into a small examination room and lifted her carefully onto the bed. A nurse adjusted her pillows and spoke with calm reassurance, telling her to breathe slowly, telling her everything would be checked. Another attached monitors to her belly, and the room filled with the quiet, rhythmic sound of the fetal heartbeat. The steady repetition should have eased her, yet tears pooled in her eyes anyway. She let them fall silently, unable to stop them. Her fingers curled around the thin blanket placed over her legs, gripping it tightly while she tried to control the tremor running through her body. A doctor entered, reviewed her vitals, spoke gently, and adjusted the monitor settings. He asked whether she felt sharp pain or only pressure, whether she had fallen or strained herself. She answered softly, careful to say only what was asked, not trusting her voice to carry anything more. When the room finally quieted, a nurse dimmed the overhead lights and left her with the steady hum of the monitors. Ava stared at the ceiling, her breathing shallow as her mind replayed what she had seen. Cole's hand wrapped around another woman's hand, his voice murmuring encouragement, the tender way he leaned toward her. She closed her eyes tightly, feeling the ache inside her expand like a bruise spreading across her heart. She had never imagined that betrayal could feel so physical, so immediate, so suffocating. The memory pressed against her chest until she could barely draw breath. She pressed a hand over her mouth, trying to stifle a sob that escaped anyway, thin and ragged. She turned her head to look at the monitor beside her, its soft glow casting shadows across the room. The heartbeat was steady. Her baby was steady. That was the only comfort she could cling to, the only certainty she had in this moment that felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath her. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers. It lay on the small tray beside the bed, screen dark. She unlocked it, hoping for something, anything, that might tell her she had misunderstood, that there was a missing piece she had not seen. But every message from Cole replayed the same pattern: delayed replies, excuses about meetings, late nights framed as obligations. All the signs she had overlooked because she chose to trust him. Each one now revealed itself as another quiet fracture in their life together. Ava set the phone down carefully and pressed both hands over her face. Her shoulders shook as tears fell freely, soaking the heels of her palms. She tried to muffle the sound, unwilling to let anyone outside hear her cry. The room felt far too quiet and far too loud at the same time, filled with the echo of her own heartbreak. She curled slightly to one side, mindful of her stomach, and drew in long breaths that only deepened the ache in her chest. Hours seemed to pass, though she knew it could not have been more than minutes, each one stretching as she tried to gather herself back into the pieces she still recognized. When she finally lowered her hands, her eyes were swollen, and her breathing had steadied only a little. She looked toward the partially closed door, half expecting Cole to appear, though part of her wished desperately that he would not. The silence beyond the doorway felt heavy, holding all the uncertainty she could not yet face. She turned back toward the faint glow of the monitor and closed her eyes again, letting the steady heartbeat fill the room as she lay waiting for her world to stop spinning. The hospital discharged Ava shortly after dawn, once her vitals stabilized and the monitor showed the baby was no longer reacting to stress. A nurse helped her sit up slowly, offering gentle instructions about rest and hydration, but most of the words slid past Ava like waves she could not hold on to. She nodded out of politeness, her voice too raw to speak, then stepped carefully into the cold morning air outside the glass doors. A thin layer of frost coated the sidewalk, and the sky above Chicago glowed with the pale colors of early sunrise. The quiet of the hour wrapped around her, a stark contrast to the turbulence inside her chest. Instead of calling Cole or returning home, Ava requested a ride to a high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan. The driver did not ask questions. She sat in the back seat with her hands resting on her stomach, her thoughts circling in slow, painful loops. She watched light reflect across the frozen lake as the car approached the building. The tower loomed tall and modern, its windows shimmering gold with the first touch of the Sunday. She had not been here in months, yet every detail felt familiar, like a memory she had tucked away for safekeeping. The doorman greeted her with quiet recognition and opened the door without hesitation. She stepped into the lobby, where marble floors reflected soft morning light, and a faint scent of eucalyptus drifted from a nearby arrangement of fresh flowers. She made her way toward the private elevator and scanned her fingerprint on the small panel beside the button. The doors opened smoothly, and the elevator carried her upward with a gentle hum, each passing floor adding to the stillness gathering inside her. When the elevator doors slid open on the penthouse level, the quiet shifted. A wide room bathed in natural light stretched before her, filled with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the glittering lake and the waking city. Elegant furnishings sat neatly in place, their muted tones creating a sense of calm. Ava stepped inside and closed the door behind her, her breath catching slightly as she heard soft footsteps approaching from the study down the hall. Her mother appeared a moment later. Eleanor Kensington stood with the composed presence she was known for. Her silver hair swept into a low chignon, her tailored suit a deep shade of navy that reflected authority without effort. Her eyes softened when she saw Ava, but her posture remained steady, a pillar of calm in the vast room. "Ava," she said gently, walking forward and placing a hand on her daughter's arm. "You look exhausted. Sit down." Ava let herself be guided to a long sofa near the windows. She lowered herself slowly, feeling the weight of the night settle on her shoulders. Eleanor handed her a glass of water, then took a seat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was not heavy. It was understanding, waiting for Ava to find her breath again. When Ava finally lifted her eyes, Eleanor studied her with quiet concern. "You came here because something happened," she said. "You do not have to tell me everything at once. Just tell me what you need." Ava swallowed carefully. Her throat still ached from holding back tears. "I could not go home," she whispered. "I just needed somewhere steady." "You are safe here," Eleanor replied. "Always." She paused. "And you are not alone." Ava looked down at her hands, tracing the faint indentation left by the hospital bracelet. Her mind felt too fragile to piece together everything she wanted to say. She waited for her thoughts to settle, but instead, the silence filled with questions she could not voice. Eleanor seemed to sense the struggle. She rose from her seat, walked to a drawer built into the sideboard beneath the window, and retrieved a thick folder. She carried it back to the coffee table, placing it between them with deliberate care. "Ava," she said softly, "there is something you need to remember, something you have allowed yourself to forget because you wanted a quieter life. But quiet does not erase truth." Ava looked at the folder, confusion shifting into caution. "What is this?" she asked. Eleanor opened it to reveal a series of documents neatly arranged in protective sleeves. The papers were familiar, though Ava had not seen them in years. Stock certificates, voting rights agreements, transfer authorizations signed long before her marriage. She reached out hesitantly, her fingertips brushing the crisp edges. "You own 90% of Kensington Global," Eleanor said, her tone unwavering. "You always have. Ever since your father passed, the company became yours. I manage it because you asked for time. You wanted freedom to build a life outside the boardroom." Ava stared at her mother, then at the documents, her heart thudding with a slow, heavy rhythm. She remembered signing some of these papers, back when she was too young to understand the magnitude. She remembered choosing a different path, a simpler one, believing she could separate love from the empire she inherited. The realization washed over her with a quiet, startling clarity. "You are not powerless," Eleanor continued. "Far from it. You have more authority than anyone in this city realizes, including your husband." Ava breathed in slowly, the full meaning unfolding inside her with measured weight. She looked again at the documents spread before her, their lines and seals shimmering faintly in the morning light. The truth settled into place like a stone dropping into water, sending ripples through the quiet room. She lifted one of the certificates with trembling fingers, her reflection faint in the glossy surface. For the first time since leaving the hospital, her breath steadied. She understood exactly who she truly was. The morning light crept slowly across the penthouse windows, warming the edges of the room where Ava sat with her hands resting softly on her lap. She had barely slept, yet her mind felt strangely clear, as if the fog that had clouded her thoughts for months had finally thinned. The documents her mother had shown her remained on the coffee table, neatly stacked but still carrying the weight of a truth she had not allowed herself to face. She looked at them for a long moment, then lifted her gaze when she heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. Eleanor re-entered the room with a calm, steady presence, carrying a phone in one hand and a folder tucked beneath her arm. "I called David," she said. "He is on his way. He will help you sort through everything." She paused and studied her daughter carefully. "Are you ready to speak with him?" Ava took a slow breath. "Yes," she said quietly. Her voice felt stronger than it had the night before. Not loud, not forceful, but steady, like a line drawn in soft stone. She looked toward the elevator doors just as the chime sounded, signaling someone's arrival. A moment later, David Holt stepped into the penthouse. He greeted Eleanor first, then turned to Ava with a respectful nod. His expression carried the seriousness of a man accustomed to handling delicate matters, yet his voice softened when he spoke. "Ava, it has been a while. I came as soon as I could." "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate it." David set his briefcase on the table and took a seat across from her. He opened it carefully, withdrawing several envelopes, printouts, and sealed files that he arranged in neat rows. "I understand something occurred last night," he said. "You do not have to share anything you are not ready to discuss, but your mother indicated you needed to review certain financial matters regarding Cole. Ava nodded slowly. I want to see everything. David studied her for a moment, perhaps expecting hesitation or wavering, but Ava's expression remained composed. He opened the first envelope and slid several sheets toward her. These are the expense reports from the last quarter, he said. Some of these transactions were flagged by the internal accounting team. At the time, Cole insisted they were related to client outreach. We began verifying them more closely last month. Oh. Ava picked up the papers, scanning the printed lines. Hotel charges, high-end restaurants, large cash withdrawals labeled as project consultations. Each entry carried a date, a time, and a location that fit too neatly with memories she now recognized differently. Her hands stayed steady, but her chest tightened with each passing line. David continued. Here are the credit card statements for his corporate card. As you will notice, several purchases were made during hours he claimed to be in meetings. He pointed to a highlighted entry. This one stood out. Jewelry. Another. Luxury clothing. And here, a private reservation at a boutique hotel outside the city. Ava looked at the names of the establishments, the timestamps, the column of totals. They no longer blurred into meaningless numbers the way they once had. Now, each one revealed another quiet betrayal hiding behind polished lies. She lifted her eyes. You verified these, she said. We did, David replied. Receipts, camera logs, witness confirmations. Enough to classify these as unauthorized expenditures. Her heartbeat thudded once, slow and firm, but her voice remained even. Show me the rest. David opened another folder. This one contained bank records, digital transfers, and copies of emails tied to the accounts Cole managed. These transactions represent misappropriated funds, small at first, then larger. Several were routed through shell accounts to disguise the trail. We copied everything once we realized the pattern. Ava studied the documents, tracing the path of each withdrawal. She remembered nights Cole blamed delayed returns or market fluctuations for setbacks. She remembered how easily she accepted his explanations because she believed it was normal. She pressed her lips together as she read, a quiet determination settling deeper within her. David paused, allowing her time. There is more, he said gently, only if you are ready. I am ready, she answered. He handed her a printed email thread. The messages were between Cole and a private consultant, discussing how to redirect funds from a travel budget to a personal account without triggering audits. The words were cautious, but unmistakably incriminating. Ava read them slowly, absorbing each line until she reached the final signature at the bottom. She lowered the paper onto the table with measured care. Confusion no longer clouded her. Shock no longer shook her. She felt something else now, something steadily rising inside her. It was not anger. It was not revenge. It was clarity. A quiet, unmistakable clarity that made every breath feel more controlled. David observed her thoughtfully. Ava, he said, these documents already form a substantial basis for internal action. But before anything is done, you need to decide how much of this you want to pursue. Ava met his eyes. I want everything documented, she said. Every line, every receipt, every transfer. He nodded. I can compile a complete dossier. Do that, she replied softly. Eleanor placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, offering silent support. Ava straightened slightly, the weight in her chest shifting into something steadier. David closed one folder and opened another. We can continue whenever you are ready, he said. Ava looked at the spread of evidence before her, then placed her fingertips on the top sheet. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and certain. Let's begin. Marina Vale adjusted her designer sunglasses as she stepped out of the sleek black car, her lips curving into a proud smile that drew the attention of several people standing near the entrance of the downtown restaurant. She placed a hand on her hip, savoring the moment as if the world itself had paused to admire her. The chilly Chicago air did not dull her satisfaction. If anything, it sharpened the sense of triumph radiating from her. She smoothed the sleeve of her new coat and waited for Cole, who was just finishing a phone call near the sidewalk. Cole ended the call with a confident nod and slipped his phone into his pocket. His posture carried the relaxed swagger of a man who believed everything in his life was aligning exactly as he wished. He walked toward Marina and opened the restaurant door with a flourish, letting her step inside first. She gave him a quick smile, pleased by the attention. They entered the warm interior, filled with soft lighting, and the low murmur of weekend diners enjoying late lunches. Several heads turned as they walked in. Marina noticed every glance. She leaned closer to Cole and whispered his name with deliberate sweetness, making sure nearby tables could hear. Cole grinned as he guided her to a corner booth. Once seated, Marina draped her coat across the seat with exaggerated care, letting the expensive label show. She placed her hand on Cole's arm, her fingers trailing slowly, as if claiming him in front of anyone watching. "You know," she said with a playful lilt, "people keep asking me if you and I are official yet." She tilted her head, her hair falling over one shoulder. "I suppose they can sense it." Cole laughed softly. "People always talk. Let them." He signaled the waiter with casual ease, as if nothing in his life required worry or caution. "Besides, we both know things are changing." "No." Marina's smile widened, full of self-assured pride. She picked up the menu and pretended to read it, though her eyes drifted frequently toward other tables to see who might be watching them. Every so often, she leaned in to whisper something into Cole's ear, laughing loudly to ensure her voice carried across the room. The waiter approached with water glasses, and Marina thanked him in a tone that suggested she was used to being admired. A couple seated nearby exchanged glances. They clearly recognized Cole from the business world, Marina noticed, straightening with even more confidence. She rested her chin on her hand, watching Cole as though she were the star of her own story. When the waiter returned to take their order, she spoke boldly. "We will start with the lobster bisque," she said, "and the chef's special. He knows what I like from last time." She did not care whether that was true. She simply liked how the words sounded. Cole nodded approvingly. "She has excellent taste." After the waiter left, Marina pulled out her phone and opened a social media app. She adjusted her hair, angling her camera to catch both her face and the wine glass in front of her. "Smile," she said to Cole, lifting the phone slightly. "People love seeing us together." Cole leaned toward her, offering a practiced smile. Marina snapped several photos, then selected one quickly and uploaded it with a caption that hinted at luxury and exclusivity. She set the phone aside, satisfied. "Everyone is going to be thrilled," she said. Cole gave a short nod. "Let them talk." When their food arrived, Marina barely tasted the first bites. She was too busy savoring the attention drifting toward their table. She spoke loudly enough for neighboring diners to hear snippets of her conversation. She mentioned expensive travel, private events, and hints of big changes coming soon. She spoke with the self-assurance of someone who believed her place beside Cole was secure. Later that afternoon, they left the restaurant and headed to a boutique on Michigan Avenue. Marina moved through the store with unrestrained confidence, touching fabrics and checking price tags, with the ease of someone who felt entitled to everything. Cole followed behind her, his hands in his pockets, offering casual comments. "That would look great on you," he said as she held up a silk dress. She smiled. "I know." She tried on several pieces, stepping out of the fitting room each time with a dramatic turn so Cole could admire her. Other shoppers glanced her way. Marina relished every second. When the sales associate asked how many items she wanted, she responded without hesitation. "All of them. Someone will bring the card." She glanced at Cole, who nodded calmly. As the purchases were finalized, Marina checked her reflection in a mirror near the counter. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her earrings, and smiled with an expression that danced between pride and superiority. She liked this new life. She liked the attention. She liked the feeling of being chosen. By early evening, they stopped at a wine bar where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights. Marina settled into a plush chair and crossed her legs elegantly. She raised her glass, swirled the deep red liquid, and leaned closer to Cole. "Soon," she murmured. "Everyone will understand." Cole nodded, as if nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. "They already do." Marina smiled again, slow and confident, basking in the glow of her own certainty. She lifted her glass to her lips and looked out across the city, entirely convinced that everything she wanted was already in her hands. The penthouse was unusually quiet in the late afternoon, the soft glow of the setting sun spreading across the polished floors and bathing the room in gentle shades of gold. Ava sat near the wide windows, her hands resting loosely on her lap as she watched the light shimmer across the lake. She had been sitting there for nearly an hour, listening to the muted hum of the city below. Her breathing was slow, steady, almost fragile, yet her posture remained straight. The silence held her like a thin layer of glass, delicate but unbroken. A sharp knock jolted the stillness. It echoed through the wide space with a jarring clarity that made her look up. The knock came again, louder this time, impatient and commanding. Ava felt her fingers curl slightly against her palms before she rose from the chair. She walked toward the door with careful steps, guided not by fear but by a reluctant sense of inevitability. When she opened the door, Cole stood on the threshold. He did not wait for an invitation. He stepped inside with the confidence of a man who believed he had every right to be there. His coat was unbuttoned, his hair slightly disheveled, but his eyes shone with an unsettling mix of irritation and triumph. He looked around the penthouse with a dismissive glance before turning to Ava. "You look better than I expected," he said, closing the door behind him. "Your mother should not have let you leave the hospital so soon, but she has always been overly sentimental." Ava did not respond. She stepped back slightly, giving him space. The room felt colder now, despite the warm colors cast by the fading Sunday. Cole reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. He slapped it onto the kitchen counter with a force that made the papers inside shift. "We need to settle this," he said briskly. "Dragging things out will only make it harder for everyone." Ava looked at the folder without moving. Cole opened it, flipping through the pages with the impatience of someone performing a task he had already rehearsed. "This is the divorce agreement," he said. "I think it is more than fair." He tapped the first page. "You sign here, and we can file immediately. It will all be clean and painless. You do not need unnecessary stress. Dragging things out will only make it harder for everyone." Ava looked at the folder without moving. Cole opened it, flipping through the pages with the impatience of someone performing a task he had already rehearsed. "This is the divorce agreement," he said. "I think it is more than fair." He tapped the first page. "You sign here, and we can file immediately. It will all be clean and painless. You do not need unnecessary stress." She clasped her hands in front of her, letting the silence settle without trying to fill it. Cole continued, his voice growing firmer. "We both know you cannot manage things on your own. You have been struggling for months. You panic easily. You make emotional decisions. That is not good for you or for the baby." He leaned against the counter, watching her as though waiting for her to accept his judgments as fact. "I am offering you an easy path. You should take it." Ava drew a slow breath. Her eyes lowered for a moment, then lifted again, steady but wounded. She opened her mouth slightly as if to speak, but no sound came out. Cole misread her silence as agreement. He straightened with renewed confidence. "Marina is willing to make space for you to see the baby," he said. "We can work out a schedule once everything settles. She is not trying to erase you. She just wants what is best for our situation." Ava blinked once, the words hitting her like a cold wind. Her shoulders rose subtly as she pulled in a quiet breath. Cole stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You should know that Marina will be part of my future. She is capable. She understands me. She wants a family. She cares about things you never cared about." He gave a small, satisfied smile. "She is already preparing to step into a more permanent role." Ava felt her throat tighten, but her posture remained composed. She did not step back. Her eyes did not waver. She simply stood there, absorbing each sting without allowing any reaction to break the surface. Cole lifted the folder and held it toward her. "Sign it," he said softly. "There is no need to make this ugly." Still, Ava remained silent. Cole sighed heavily. "If you refuse now, I will let my attorney handle it. He will move faster than you can keep up with. You do not want to go through that." He placed the folder back on the counter. "You know I am right. Use." The room filled with a deep, heavy quiet. The fading light painted long shadows across the floor as the silence stretched between them. Ava finally looked up, meeting his eyes directly for the first time since he entered. Something had shifted in her gaze. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was clarity, cool and unmistakable. Cole frowned slightly, confused by the change. Ava inhaled with steady control, then spoke in a calm voice. "We will talk in the right place." Cole looked satisfied, misinterpreting her words as acceptance. He gave a short nod. "Good," he said. "I knew you would come around." He grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the door, his confidence almost careless. "I will expect your cooperation." He left without waiting for a reply, closing the door behind him. Ava stood in the stillness he left behind, the quiet settling around her like a thin veil as the last of the daylight faded. Cole looked satisfied, misinterpreting her words as acceptance. He gave a short nod. "Good," he said. "I knew you would come around." He grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the door, his confidence almost careless. "I will expect your cooperation." He left without waiting for a reply, closing the door behind him. Ava stood in the stillness he left behind, the quiet settling around her like a thin veil as the last of the daylight faded. Conversations blended into a steady hum, interrupted only by the clicking of cameras and the occasional clatter of chairs being adjusted. Cole Harrington entered through the side doors with the confident stride of a man who believed the day belonged to him. He wore a crisp charcoal suit that he straightened with a practiced motion as he surveyed the room. Several board members nodded politely as he passed, and he returned their greetings with a polished smile. His movements carried an unmistakable air of triumph. He believed the narrative was his to control. The divorce papers were ready. Marina was waiting for him at home. Everything felt aligned in his favor. He approached the stage and spoke briefly with the event coordinator, glancing at the screens displaying Kensington Global's logo. "Let's move quickly," he said. "We have a full agenda." The coordinator nodded, unaware of the storm about to unfold. As Cole adjusted his tie and prepared to step forward, the murmuring in the crowd shifted. A quiet ripple of surprise moved across the room as the doors at the back of the hall opened again. Ava Kensington entered, dressed in a tailored black suit that contrasted sharply with the soft lighting. Her steps were steady and unhurried. The calm strength in her posture drew the eyes of nearly everyone near the aisle. Some whispered her name in astonishment. Others straightened in their seats, sensing the significance of her presence. Cole froze for a fraction of a second before masking his unease with a strained smile. He stepped toward the microphone, intending to continue as planned, but Ava raised a hand. The simple gesture held an unexpected power. Conversations scattered into silence. The cameras pivoted toward her. Ava walked to the stage and stopped beside Cole without looking at him. A staff member offered her a microphone, which she accepted with a small nod. The entire hall held its breath. "Thank you for being here," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "There is something important I need to clarify before today's agenda continues." Cole leaned toward her. "Ava, this is not the time," he whispered sharply. But she continued without acknowledging him. She turned toward the audience. "For several years I have chosen to live quietly," she said. "Many of you may not know the full structure of our company's ownership. Today I want to correct that understanding." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I am the majority owner of Kensington Global. I hold 90% of the voting shares." A collective gasp spread through the hall. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. Cole's face drained of color. He took a step forward as if to protest, but no sound came from him. Ava continued. "With that ownership comes responsibility. Responsibility to our employees, to our partners, and to our investors. In fulfilling that duty, I have reviewed recent financial activities conducted under the authority of the Chief Financial Officer." She turned slightly toward Cole. "Those activities include unauthorized withdrawals, misuse of company funds, and falsified reports." Gasps echoed again. Several board members exchanged alarmed looks. Ava lifted a folder and opened it. "This includes specific transfers to personal accounts, undocumented expenses for luxury travel, and financial support designated for individuals outside the company." She held up a set of printed records, all verified by independent auditors. Cole finally found his voice. "Ava, stop this. You do not know what you are talking about. These documents are meaningless." Ava looked at him with calm composure. "They are not meaningless. They are signed by you." "No." The screens behind them flickered as images of receipts, email threads, and financial logs appeared. The audience reacted with disbelief and outrage. Cole backed away from the stage slightly, his chest rising and falling unevenly. Ava lowered the folder. "Effective immediately, Cole Harrington is removed from all duties pending full internal investigation." She handed the microphone back to the staff member. Security. Two uniformed guards stepped forward from the sides of the room. Cole's eyes widened. "You cannot do this," he said. "You cannot humiliate me like this. Ava, think about what you are doing." But Ava did not speak. She stepped aside as the guards approached him. Cole tried to pull away, but their grip tightened firmly on his arms. The room erupted into a storm of flashes as reporters captured every second. Cole's voice rose in desperation. "Ava, stop this! You cannot ruin everything!" She remained still, her expression composed and unreadable. As Cole was escorted down the aisle, Marina appeared near the entrance, her face pale, her hands trembling. She had come expecting a simple corporate event. Instead, she watched the man she believed she would build a future with being removed in front of hundreds of witnesses. Her lips parted in silent disbelief, tears filling her eyes as Cole reached toward her helplessly. The guards pulled him past her. His voice faded into the noise of the hall. The cameras followed them until they disappeared through the side doors. And in the sudden quiet that followed, Ava stood alone on the stage, the weight of the moment settling around her as the hall held its breath. Morning light filtered weakly through a layer of gray clouds, casting a muted glow across the courthouse plaza. Reporters gathered in clusters near the steps, adjusting their cameras and checking their microphones as they prepared for the day's proceedings. The air buzzed with urgency. Overnight, the story of Kensington Global's explosive internal revelation had dominated every major network. Headlines flashed across television screens and online feeds with words like fraud, scandal, and misconduct. The world waited to see what would come next. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation. Journalists lined the hallway, whispering rapidly as they reviewed notes and compared schedules. Security officers kept them behind marked lines, allowing only attorneys and essential staff to move freely. Every few seconds, a camera flashed. Every few minutes, another news alert chimed on someone's phone. Cole Harrington arrived through the side entrance, escorted by two officers. He wore a navy suit, though it no longer carried the sharp confidence it once did. His shoulders were stiff, and his eyes darted quickly across the room as if searching for an escape. He forced a strained smile when cameras turned toward him, lifting his chin as if the attention still belonged to him. "This is all exaggerated," he muttered to the officer beside him. "It will be cleared up." But the officer did not respond. Cole walked toward the courtroom doors, trying to steady his breath. He had spent the previous night on the phone with multiple attorneys, attempting to assemble a version of the story that might save him. He blamed audits, he blamed subordinates, he blamed misunderstandings. He even tried, for a moment, to blame Ava, but the attorneys warned him it would not hold. Nothing he said seemed strong enough to counter the evidence that had been projected across giant screens the day before. On the courthouse steps outside, Marina Vale stood surrounded by reporters, her makeup smudged and her expression tight with panic. She clutched her phone in trembling hands, speaking in fragments as she tried to defend herself. "I did not know," she insisted. "I never asked him for anything. This is all twisted." But the reporters pressed harder. "Were you aware company funds were used for your travel? Did you receive gifts bought with Kensington Global's budget? Were you involved in hiding transactions?" She shook her head, overwhelmed. Her voice cracked as she attempted to continue, but more cameras pushed forward. In the rush of attention she once craved, she now looked exposed, cornered, and desperately unprepared. Inside the courtroom, the seats filled quickly. Attorneys shuffled papers, clerks arranged files, and spectators settled into place with quiet tension. Cole sat at the defense table, his jaw clenched as he scanned the room. He expected Ava to be absent, convinced she would want nothing to do with the proceedings. The thought gave him a faint sense of control, but when the rear doors opened, Ava entered with calm, steady steps. She took a seat in the gallery, her posture composed. She wore a simple dark dress and kept her hands folded in her lap. She did not look toward Cole. She did not need to. Her presence alone shifted the energy in the room, drawing the eyes of reporters and spectators alike. Cole stiffened. His lips tightened as he glanced toward her, hoping to find some sign of doubt or hesitation in her face. There was none. She sat quietly, her expression unreadable. A court clerk called for order. The room settled into silence as the judge entered and took his seat. Papers shuffled softly as attorneys rose to state their appearances. The proceedings began with a review of the charges brought by the state. The prosecutor stepped forward, adjusting her glasses as she opened a thick file. She addressed the court with clear, measured words. The defendant, Cole Harrington, is charged with multiple counts of financial misconduct. This includes misappropriation of corporate funds, falsification of financial records, and unauthorized use of company assets for personal benefit. She turned a page. Additionally, evidence shows deliberate attempts to conceal these activities through the creation of shell accounts and misleading internal reports. A murmur rippled through the room. Cole shifted in his seat, gripping the table's edge. The prosecutor presented exhibits one by one: printed transfers, emails, receipts, testimonies from auditors, and verification from independent accountants. Each item was laid out with clinical precision. Each detail deepened the gravity of the accusations. Cole's attorney rose to object at several points, claiming misinterpretation, exaggeration, or lack of context. The judge allowed brief clarifications but overruled each objection with calm authority. Cole's face grew paler with every passing minute. Outside, the crowd continued to grow as more people arrived, drawn by live news coverage. Some held signs demanding accountability. Others simply watched the screens set up near the steps, following every detail that emerged from inside the courtroom. Back inside, the prosecutor concluded her presentation with a firm, unshaken tone. "Given the evidence," she said, "the state asserts that the actions of the defendant violate multiple statutes governing corporate financial integrity. We request that the court proceed with full consideration of these charges." The judge nodded slowly, reviewing his notes. He leaned back slightly, adjusting his glasses as he prepared to speak. At the defense table, Cole swallowed hard. His fingers twitched against the folder in front of him. He shot another glance toward Ava, hoping for some sign of support or hesitation. She remained perfectly still. The judge cleared his throat. The room fell into complete silence, the air tightening with anticipation as he prepared to continue. And then, just as he opened his mouth, the proceedings paused. The moment stretched in tense, breathless expectation. The courtroom remained tense as the judge prepared to speak, the soft rustle of papers settling into a silence so deep it pressed against every breath. Ava sat in the second row, her hands resting calmly on her lap while she watched the judge lean forward slightly. The light from the tall windows illuminated the raised platform, casting long shadows across the polished wooden rail. Cole sat at the defense table, his shoulders drawn tight and his fingers curled into a rigid grip on the edge of the table. His attorney whispered something urgently, but Cole barely reacted. He stared straight at the judge with a desperate intensity. The judge lifted a sheet of paper and placed it neatly in front of him. His voice was steady, carrying the authority that defined his decades on the bench. "Mr. Harrington," he said, "this court has reviewed the evidence presented during these proceedings. The documentation of financial misconduct is clear and substantial. The audit reports, digital correspondence, and testimony from independent investigators demonstrate a consistent pattern of deliberate misuse of corporate assets." A faint murmur moved through the gallery, quickly silenced by the bailiff's stern glance. The judge continued, "Your actions undermine the trust placed in you by shareholders, employees, and the public. The court must consider the gravity of these offenses as well as the impact they have had on the individuals and institutions involved." Cole's jaw clenched. He shifted as if preparing to speak, but the judge raised a hand gently. "You will have a moment to address the court after the sentence is pronounced," he said. Cole swallowed his words and lowered his gaze. Defeated but still clinging to a fragile hope, Ava watched quietly, her expression composed, though her heartbeat thudded with a steady weight. She did not look at Cole. Her attention remained on the judge and the slow, deliberate rhythm of his words. "Due to the severity and duration of your misconduct," the judge said, "this court finds it necessary to impose a significant custodial sentence." The room seemed to hold its breath. "Mr. Harrington," the judge said, "you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in state prison. You will be remanded into custody immediately to begin your term of incarceration." Gasps erupted across the gallery. Several reporters rushed to capture the moment, cameras clicking rapidly. Cole's head jerked upward, his eyes flaring with disbelief. 10 years, he whispered, as if the words themselves carried a physical sting. You cannot be serious. The judge maintained his calm composure. You may address the court. Cole's attorney motioned for him to stay seated, but Cole pushed to his feet anyway. This is ridiculous, he said, his voice cracking from a mix of anger and fear. I did not do what you think I did. These accounts were misinterpreted. I never intended harm. This is all blown out of proportion. You cannot destroy my life over paperwork. The judge listened without expression. When Cole finished, the judge offered a simple nod. Your statement has been noted, he said. Officers, please escort the defendant. 2 officers approached the defense table. Cole stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief, but he did not resist. The officers took his arms firmly and guided him toward the side door that led to the holding area. His voice rose again, louder this time, filled with a desperate edge. Ava, he called out. Ava, say something. You know me. You know this is not right. Ava did not respond. Her gaze remained steady, her hands clasped together with quiet strength. As Cole was led away, Marina stood near the back of the gallery. Her face was pale, her eyes red, and her hands shook as she clutched her purse. She had arrived late and watched the verdict unfold in horrified silence. Now she sank into a seat, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered broken fragments to herself. Cameras flicked toward her briefly before returning to the main event. The officers guided Cole through the door. The heavy metal latch clicked shut behind him, its sharp sound echoing across the courtroom like a final punctuation mark. The judge dismissed the room, and people rose from their seats in a chaotic flurry of movement. Attorneys gathered their files. Reporters pushed toward the exits, speaking quickly into their microphones as they delivered live updates. Spectators whispered to each other, replaying the judge's words and the image of Cole being escorted away. Ava remained seated for several moments. The noise around her faded into a distant rumble as she breathed in slowly, letting the quiet settle into her chest. She finally rose, smoothing her dress, and stepped toward the aisle. She walked with measured steps, passing rows of people who turned to look at her with respect, curiosity, or quiet admiration. She exited the courtroom and entered the hallway, where security maintained a path for her. Reporters called her name, microphones reaching toward her, but she did not stop. She moved past them with calm determination, her eyes fixed on the double doors ahead. When she stepped outside, the air met her with a cool, gentle breeze. The sun had climbed higher, breaking through the clouds and casting warm light across the courthouse steps. People filled the plaza, reacting to the verdict with a mix of shock and approval. But Ava felt as if she were standing in a world apart from their noise. She descended the steps slowly. The sunlight brushed against her face, soft and steady. For the first time in a long time, she felt her breath settle into an even rhythm. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, lifting her gaze toward the sky that stretched wide and open above her. And with that quiet clarity surrounding her, she took her next step forward.